To begin the project, you will need your 9 by 12 inch sheet of poster board, a 12-inch ruler, and your HB or number 2 pencil. And you'll probably need an eraser, but we don't really need to erase yet, but you might if you get your line off. So we're going to center an 8-inch square on our paper. And to do that, I'm going to line my ruler, my 0, so that's the 0, up with the edge of my paper. And if it's 12 inches and I want an 8-inch square in the center, I'm going to take 8 from 12, which leaves me 4 inches. And if I want to make it perfectly centered, I need to have half of that 4 inches on either side of my paper. So 4 divided by 2, because I have 2 sides, is 2. So from my 12, I'm going to come in to the 10. And I'm going to put just a little mark with my pencil, and not a very dark mark, just a little dot. And I'm going to come from the 0, and I'm going to go over to the 2, because that's, 4 minus 2 is 2. And I'm going to put just a little mark. So now if I move my 0 to that little mark right there, and I measure to this mark, that's 8 inches. So now I have an 8-inch section marked off on the top of my paper. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom of my paper. So line my 0 with the edge of my paper, and I'm going to come over 2 inches, put a little mark at the 2, come from the 12, 2 inches in, and put a little mark at the 10. Now lightly, we want to do this lightly so we can erase. I'm going to connect the 2 marks at the 10 inches on this side of my paper together. So I'm going to put my ruler right up against that mark and very lightly draw a line all the way across my paper. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Very lightly draw a line from top to bottom or bottom to top of my paper. And now your paper should look like this. Now I'm going to measure this line. I'm going to put my 0 on the edge of my paper. My paper is 9 inches across, and if I want it to be 8 inches in the center, I take 8 from 9, which leaves an inch. So then I have to divide 1 inch in half so I have equal amounts on both sides. So 1 inch divided in half is half an inch. I'm going to come in from the 9, half an inch, and put a mark lightly right there. Come in from the 0, half an inch, and put a mark right there, and do the same thing on the other side, on the other line. So half an inch from my 9 and a little mark, half an inch from the 0 and put a little mark. Now I'm going to connect those dots, those little marks that I put across both sides of my paper. Very lightly again. And you don't have to go from edge to edge on this one because we already have our guidelines. And do it on both sides. And now you have an 8-inch square centered in the middle of your paper. So now for this next step, we have to create a border around our square, or on the inside of our square, where our blocks are going to fit. So to do that, we're going to come in half an inch and draw another square, a half inch smaller than our 8-inch square. So we're going to do a 7.5 inch square on the inside. So I'm going to put my ruler 0 to that line, and I'm going to come in half an inch. And I'm going to put my mark half an inch from that side. And do the same thing on this side. and lightly connect those lines. Very lightly so we can erase without leaving pencil marks. The lighter you're drawing, the easier it will be to erase the unneeded pencil lines. I'm going to do the same thing now this direction. So on this line, I'm going to come across 1/2 inch on both sides. And then connect those marks. And now I have a 7.5 inch square inside my 8 inch square. And I'm going to go ahead and erase those extra little lines. Now across the top of my line, my 7.5 inch line on the inside, I am going to measure from that center point or that corner point right there. I'm going to measure over 2 inches because we're putting our 3 blocks across. So come over 2 inches, put a little mark. Then we're going to leave a little space right there. So we're going to go over to the 2.5 inch, put a little mark. Now we're going to measure 2 inches from there, which would be 3.5, 4.5. And then come at the 5 because that's a 1/2 inch space right there. And that's another 2 inch square. We're going to do the same thing on the bottom. So we're going to line our 0 up to this inside point, come over 1/2 inch, put a little mark. Oh, nope, sorry. Go over to the 2, put a little mark. Then we'll put our 1/2 inch mark in there. Go to the 4.5 because that's 2 inches, and then to the 5. And that gives us a 2 inch space. Now we're going to connect those lines inside that 7.5 inch square. And your paper should look like this. Now we're going to turn our paper over and do the same thing this direction. So lining our 0 up with that top corner, we'll come over 2 inches and put a little mark, then 1/2 inch and put a little mark, then 2 inches again, which would be at the 4.5, and then another little mark at the 5. So we have 3 2 inch squares, 1, 2, 3. So we'll come down to the bottom and do the same thing again. 2 inches first, 1/2 inch, and then it'll be at the 4.5, and then at the 5. And we're going to connect those lines. And we're doing the lines lightly again. We don't want super dark lines. It's easier to erase the lighter we draw. Now you have a 7.5 inch square divided, well, we have an 8 inch square divided into 9 equal squares. And each of these is 2 inches with a 1/2 inch border around them.